The transport vessel pierced the skies of Gorvex 9 like a silver needle threading through silk. Below, the surface of the alien world gleamed like crystal glass. Towering spires stretched toward the heavens, wrapped in glowing conduits of energy. Cities floated in midair, suspended by anti-gravity engines, older than Earth's first spaceflight. Massive crystalline structures pulsed softly, as if the entire planet was breathing with life and light. Dr. Elias Carter stepped onto the landing platform with a blend of awe and cautious optimism. Around him, the rest of the human delegation marveled at the technological wonders. There were no roads, only glowing lanes of light that curved through the sky like threads of starlight. Even the air smelled different, metallic, clean, humming with invisible energy. The Zellerians waited at the edge of the platform, tall, elegant beings draped in flowing robes that shimmered like liquid metal. Their eyes, luminous and unreadable, scanned the humans with the detached curiosity of scientists studying insects under glass. To the Zellerians, Gorvex 9 was home. To the humans, it was a mirror reflecting how far behind they truly were. And yet, even in that moment, something flickered in Carter's eyes. Not fear, not intimidation. He wasn't the kind of man people noticed first. Shorter than most, with untamed hair and glasses that always slipped down his nose. Dr. Elias Carter didn't look like a hero or a diplomat, but he was brilliant, a xenolinguist with a mind like a quantum computer and the heart of a poet. Back on Earth, his work had helped crack alien dialects no one else could understand. But here, on Gorvex 9, he was just the human translator. No fanfare, no recognition, just a quiet seat at the edge of the delegation's table. Still, Carter didn't mind being overlooked. He was used to it. He knew that true influence wasn't earned through loud speeches or flashy tech. It was earned in listening, understanding, and responding when no one expected you to. Behind his calm eyes, he was always observing every word, every tone, every subtle expression the Zellerians let slip. And deep down, he already knew they didn't respect humans. Not yet, but they would. The meeting chamber shimmered with translucent walls and ambient lights that shifted with the speaker's tones. A dozen Zellerian scholars and dignitaries hovered around a crystalline table that projected stellar maps and galactic trade routes. Dr. Carter sat near the edge, hands folded, eyes sharp. The human delegation presented their case for diplomatic ties, exploration data, Earth's advancements, their commitment to peace. It was hopeful, respectful, and it was met with condescending smiles. A Zellerian elder tilted his head. "Tell us, Earthborn," he said in a voice like silk over knives. "How many light years has your species traveled without outside aid?" Another chimed in. "You only recently discovered quantum relay travel, did you not? Fascinating, primitive, but fascinating." Laughter rippled through the chamber, not cruel, dismissive. To them, humanity was a child who had just learned to crawl. Earth's biological frailty is also unfortunate, a younger Zellerian noted, lips curling. Such short lifespans, so much emotion, so inefficient. Carter's face didn't move, but inside, he was boiling, not with rage, but with they thought humanity was weak. They had no idea what strength really looked like. Later that night, a diplomatic reception unfolded in the glimmering atrium of the Zellerian Grand Hall. It floated above a city made of light and crystal, overlooking a horizon where twin moons kissed the edge of the sky. Carter wandered among the glowing orbs of food and alien music, silently absorbing the culture around him. A group of Zellerians stood near one of the gravity fountains, speaking in rapid tones. Their words, sharp and fluid, danced in their native language, a language Carter knew far better than they realized. "Humans are desperate for relevance," one said. "They still think survival makes them worthy." Another chuckled. Let them speak. Let them plead. It changes nothing. Their potential ends where their planet begins. Laughter. Dismissal. Carter stood frozen, heart pounding in his chest. Not because of the insult, because of the truth behind it. They would never listen. Not to weakness, not to apologies, not to borrowed words. If humanity was going to earn its place in the galaxy, it would have to command it. He turned quietly and walked away from the conversation. His mind was no longer racing. It was focused. He would make them see, not by matching their technology, not by shouting louder, but by proving that the very things they mocked, resilience, emotion, creativity, were not weaknesses. They were the key to something even the Zalarians had forgotten. Dr. Elias Carter stood still, the laughter of the Zalarians echoing in his ears like wind through empty ruins. But his focus wasn't on their mockery. It was on the sound beneath the ridicule, the cadence of their words, the shape of their vowels. His heart thudded in his chest as his brain raced to confirm what he was hearing. This wasn't the modern Zalarian language taught in interspecies diplomacy courses. No, this was older, ancient, even a language believed to be extinct, buried in forgotten scripts and lost to the passing of eons. He strained to listen more closely, tuning out the scornful chatter around him, the accents, the phrasing. Yes, there was no mistake. It was the root dialect, the Proto-Zalarian tongue he had studied in obscurity during long sleepless nights back on Earth. Back then, no one cared about dead languages, not even his own peers. But Carter did. He saw meaning where others saw trivia. Now, standing in the center of a room filled with beings who saw his kind as insects, he realized something stunning. These Zalarians didn't even recognize the depth of their own speech. They used the words like casual slang, completely unaware of the ancient origins behind them. They were echoing a history they had forgotten. His mind buzzed with possibility. If humanity could rediscover what an entire empire had lost, what did that say about the human spirit? And more pressingly, if the Zalarians had forgotten their past, what else had they overlooked? The room rippled with amusement. Delicate crystalline glasses clinked in alien hands. Holographic banners shimmered with abstract symbols Carter still couldn't read. But he didn't care about any of that. He saw only opportunity. Karath Lun Severanika, Carter said, loud and clear. The laughter stopped. Silence slammed down like a dropped curtain. Dozens of Zalarian eyes turned to him, their features frozen in disbelief. It was as if time paused, the galaxy holding its breath. What did he just say? One whispered, voice sharp with fear. Carter took a step forward, his gaze unwavering. I said, there is truth buried beneath your pride. A murmur spread like wildfire through the room. The words were unmistakable, pure Proto-Zalarian, flawless in tone and inflection, something no human, no outsider should have known. Ambassador Velixar stood, face pale, eyes narrowed. That language has not been spoken in over 10,000 cycles. Carter gave a half smile. Then maybe it's time someone brought it back. The air grew heavy with uncertainty. Some Zalarians stepped back, as if afraid the knowledge itself could infect them. Others stared at Carter like he was a ghost from their own forgotten myths. For the first time since arriving, Carter didn't feel small. He felt dangerous. Panic didn't come all at once. It crept in quietly, a shifting unease that slithered through the hall. Conversations erupted in hushed, frantic whispers. Eyes flicked between Carter and their leaders, searching for answers where none could be found. He must have stolen it. This is espionage, someone barked. Or prophecy, another whispered. The voice of the forgotten, they called him in the old scrolls. Carter remained still, the center of a storm he had unknowingly unleashed. Part of him was terrified, but a deeper part, the one that had been overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated his whole life, was on fire. This was it, the moment, the crack in the armor of an empire that had looked down on Earth like a child staring at ants. A Zalarian scholar approached hesitantly, scanning Carter as if expecting him to vanish. "Where did you learn this language? Who taught you our sacred tongue?" Carter met his gaze. "I taught myself. No one remembers the past like a species that has had to fight for every step forward." Gasps, another shockwave, and then the real fear set in. Because if a human could unlock their oldest secrets, what else could humanity uncover? What else could they become? Carter turned slowly to face the high table, voice calm. "You called us primitive, but you've forgotten your own roots. Maybe the real danger is what else you've chosen to forget." The grand chamber was transformed in minutes. What had once been a diplomatic reception now resembled a trial. Carter stood before the High Council, an oval table of 11 Zalarians whose robes shimmered with authority and suspicion. Security drones hovered above, ready to strike at the slightest threat. The atmosphere was suffocating. "You will explain," Counselor Zexala commanded, her voice as cold as the stars. "How did you come to speak what no living Zalarian remembers?" Carter didn't flinch. "I studied, researched, dug through what your scholars called irrelevant. We found fragments, translations, logic patterns. We pieced them together." "We?" Zexala pressed. "Humanity," Carter said firmly. "We may be young, but we are not blind. We learn, we adapt, we endure." Whispers rose again. The council leaned in. "Or you were given this knowledge," said another, "by those who seek to destabilize us." Or perhaps, Carter interrupted, "you fear that your control isn't as absolute as you believed." A dangerous silence followed. He could feel the weight of Earth behind him. Every word risked war, or worse, exile. But he also knew this was the moment to make them see, not fear, but respect. "We came here in peace," he continued, "but don't mistake humility for weakness. Humanity has survived ice, fire, war, and darkness. We carry our scars like banners. We don't forget our past. Maybe that's what sets us apart." Zexala stared at him, her expression unreadable. "You are a mystery now, Elias Carter, one that may shift the balance of power across the stars." He met her gaze, steady. "Then maybe it's time the stars made room for us." The air inside the interrogation chamber was sharp, sterile, and still. Lights pulsed faintly along the walls, casting a pale blue hue over every surface. Dr. Logan Carter sat at the center, wrists bound to a sleek, metallic chair that felt more like a throne for the condemned. Surrounding him were 12 Zalarian arbiters, tall, spindly beings cloaked in ceremonial robes. Their obsidian eyes locked on him with expressions that blended intellect and unease. "State your origin," one of them demanded, its voice a chorus of overlapping tones. Carter took a breath, steadying himself. "Earth, human, you already know this." Another leaned forward. "How do you speak the language of the first tongue? A dialect even our eldest scholars can barely recognize." Carter felt the weight of 100 expectations pressed down on him. He knew his answer would ripple far beyond this room, because I recognized it. Not just here on Earth. In ruins older than any of our known civilizations. Murmurs flared. One Zalarian clutched a data scroll tighter, while another narrowed their eyes. "Impossible," hissed the arbiter to his left. "Your species is barely spacefaring. You cling to your planet like children to a cradle." Carter didn't flinch. "And yet here I am." Silence fell like a stone. What began as mockery now simmered with fear. For the first time they realized this wasn't just about a human speaking a lost language. It was about what it meant. Carter sat in silence as a dozen alien gazes bore into him. But his mind raced ahead. The question wasn't how he knew the language. It was why. "You think this is chance? That I stumbled onto your precious tongue by accident?" he asked. "Look deeper." He tapped the holographic pad they'd given him. Ancient symbols shimmered into view, spirals, slashes, and glyphs etched into weathered stone. These aren't Zelarian alone, we found these on Earth. In caves, on monoliths buried beneath ice and jungle, one arbiter barked a challenge. Forgery, no, Carter replied, his voice like steel, carbon-dated, 10,000 years old, maybe more, older than any known human civilization. So tell me, how did your words end up on our world before we had writing? The room sank into a stunned hush. You're suggesting Earth was once part of our empire? Another asked, almost whispering. Carter's face was unreadable, or we shared something even older, a past neither of us remember. No one spoke, no one moved. In that moment, Carter felt something shift. The walls of arrogance began to crack, not from brute force, but from truth. The chamber doors slid open, the interrogators left, but Carter remained under armed guard. He wasn't a prisoner anymore, but he wasn't free either. Outside the room, the citadel boiled with tension. News spread fast. Some Zelarians, particularly the scholars, historians, and younger minds, were fascinated. They wanted to learn more, to reopen archives sealed for centuries. But others, especially the ruling elite, weren't so eager. This revelation threatens the pillars of dominance, hissed a counselor in a darkened hall. If humans shared our past, they are not lesser, they are rivals. Carter, still under surveillance, overheard these conversations. He began to understand just how deeply this shook them. This wasn't just history, it was power, legacy, control. The Empire had built its strength on the myth of superiority. If that myth shattered, so might their rule. Whispers turned to arguments, arguments to threats. One faction demanded Carter be sent back to Earth with honor. Another insisted he be silenced permanently. He saw it in their eyes, the fear, the cracks spreading through the hierarchy, and he realized something terrifying. He wasn't just a messenger of truth, he was now a symbol of it. Deep within the citadel's shadows, a meeting took place. He must not leave. The voice was calm, but final. Around the hidden table sat leaders of the Ascendancy Front, a radical faction devoted to preserving Zelarian supremacy at any cost. The scholars think he brings knowledge. Another growled, but he brings rot, doubt, rebellion. If he returns to Earth, he'll unite others, stir them. They'll start asking questions we buried long ago. The plan was simple, quiet, a death made to look like an accident, a diplomatic failure, a footnote in a larger story. No glory, no martyrdom, just erasure. Carter's fate was sealed with a silent vote. Elsewhere in the citadel, he felt the shift. Doors that once opened now stayed locked. Guards once courteous became distant. He wasn't paranoid. He was being watched, and yet, some still supported him. A few dared to whisper the truth, slipping him warnings and fragments of hidden records. The citadel had become a battlefield, not of lasers and bombs, but of secrets and fear. In the depths of the citadel, Carter met a Zelarian scholar named Vareth, young, passionate, and fearless. They spoke for hours about shared history, about what it could mean for both species. "You're not just a man," Vareth said. "You're a mirror, and our people hate what they see." Carter nodded, trusting Vareth, hoping maybe foolishly, for an ally. But trust is a dangerous gift. That night, Carter returned to his chamber. The lights were dimmed, the air too still. He didn't notice the figure in the corner, cloaked in black, holding a blade that shimmered with venom. As the door sealed behind him, a message blinked red on his comm, from Vareth. "Forgive me, they threatened my family. I didn't have a choice." Carter froze. Behind him, the assassin stepped forward. The air in Carter's cell was stale, thick with metallic bitterness and cold enough to gnaw at his bones. Somewhere deep in the citadel, alarms pulsed softly, a constant reminder that time was bleeding out. He sat with his back against the wall, eyes narrowed at the single slit of artificial light overhead. They were coming. He could feel it. Footsteps echoed in the distance. Not the heavy march of guards, but soft, cautious strides. The cell door creaked open, and a figure slipped in, Salarian, cloaked in muted colors, bearing no insignia of allegiance. Her name was Lyra, a historian cast aside for questioning official records. "We don't have long," she whispered, voice taut. "You want the truth? Then follow me." They slipped through ancient tunnels beneath the citadel, winding past walls etched with forgotten scripts. Carter clutched the only thing he had: hope. It wasn't enough to survive. He needed to reveal what he knew. Guards swarmed the upper levels. Carter and Lyra moved through darkness, hearts racing, shadows clinging to their backs. There was no room for fear now. Every breath, every step, was a gamble. The vaults of Gorvex 9 lay hidden behind what looked like a collapsed ventilation shaft. Beyond it, a single hallway descended into pitch-black silence. Lyra activated an ancient keystone, and the corridor lit with a pale blue glow. The doors opened with a sigh that hadn't been heard in centuries. Stacks of data crystals hovered in stasis fields. Holograms flickered to life, displaying texts in dead languages and celestial maps long erased from common knowledge. Carter approached a terminal, inserting a decrypted cipher chip he'd hidden in his boot. Since his capture, images bloomed in the air. Human figures beside early Zellarians, not in chains, not in war, but as equals, builders, scientists, friends, a shared civilization. "These records, they're older than your council's timeline," Carter murmured. "They've buried this." Lyra nodded, eyes wide with awe and horror. "If this gets out, the Empire will crack. Then we crack it wide open." The council chamber towered like a cathedral. 12 high seats overlooked a circular platform where Carter now stood, flanked by guards who would not hesitate to execute him. His voice was the only weapon he had. "These are not lies. They are your history," he began, holding up a projection of the ancient texts. "We were not your enemies. We were your kin." Murmurs erupted. Some counselors scoffed. Others leaned forward, brows furrowed. Lyra stood in the shadows, watching, praying. "If you destroy me, you destroy the bridge to your past," Carter continued, "and maybe to your future." One counselor slammed a fist against his podium. "This is heresy. Earth is a backwater. These claims are poison." But another, a soft-spoken scholar, spoke up. "And yet, these phrases, I've seen them in pre-Empire ruins." Debate spiraled into chaos. Words became weapons, but Carter did not flinch. The storm of voices broke when Carter said one final thing: "To light we return. From light we came." Silence crashed over the chamber. An elder counselor, Viren, old and merciless in his rulings, stood slowly, his eyes locked with Carter's. "Say that again," he said, voice shaking. Carter repeated it, slowly, clearly. Viren stepped forward, the room deathly quiet. "My grandmother used to say those words. She said they came from the stars, from our ancestors." No one moved. The truth hit like gravity. The illusion shattered. Superiority turned to shame. The council convened behind closed doors, but the damage was done. The records had already been transmitted. Whispers turned to roars across the Empire. Carter, once a prisoner, now stood at the edge of a new era. The Zellarians would have to choose: cling to a lie or embrace the truth. He looked to Lyra. "Whatever comes next, they can't unsee it." She smiled faintly. History has a way of breaking chains, and in the vastness of the stars, something ancient stirred awake, a legacy reborn. The revelation hit the Zellarian Empire like a detonation in the void. One moment, humanity was an afterthought, primitive, chaotic, too emotional to be taken seriously. The next, they were something else entirely: kin, forgotten family, pieces of a puzzle that had been hidden beneath layers of pride and propaganda for centuries. In the council spires, Debate exploded like wildfire. Holographic displays lit up with footage of Carter's trial. Scholars screamed over one another in ancient dialects, some demanding a reclassification of human status, others denying the evidence altogether. In the streets below, the citizens were no less shaken. Propaganda beams once mocking Earth's primitive past now flickered with uncertainty. Murals glorifying Zalarian supremacy were defaced overnight, and everywhere whispers, "If they're part of us, what else have we been lied to about?" For the ruling elite, it was chaos. Carefully preserved narratives began to unravel. Old records, long locked away, were re-examined. The fear crept in, not of humans, but of the truth they brought with them. Carter didn't know it yet, but he had sparked a cultural quake, 1,000 years of arrogance, crumbling with a few ancient words. Carter stood on the sky bridge of the High Archives, staring down at the sprawling metropolis of Zalar Prime. It still didn't feel real. A few weeks ago, he was a prisoner. Now, he was being called the Reclaimer. Dr. Carter, a voice called softly behind him. It was Sorakai, the rebel historian, who helped him escape. "They've officially offered you a seat on the Intercultural Historical Council. Your vote will count equally with ours." He turned slowly. "You're not worried that a human has that kind of power?" Sorakai tilted her head, the faint glint of curiosity in her large black eyes. "We used to think power came from bloodlines and conquest, but you proved it comes from truth, that, and a little bit of stubbornness." Carter laughed, but his smile didn't last long. He could feel the pressure growing. His acceptance would mean more than recognition. It meant responsibility and enemies. Not everyone was thrilled about a human helping to rewrite Zalarian history. Not everyone wanted history rewritten. Still, Carter accepted the offer, not because he wanted power, but because he owed it to both species, Zalarian and human, to make sure the truth wasn't buried again. Once, Carter had heard whispers in the Citadel halls, fleshkin, the screaming ones, apes with guns. Now, when he passed, the whispers were different. Ancestor brother, Bridgewalker. It was surreal. Zalarian scholars requested to study Earth's earliest myths. Delegates from distant provinces asked Carter to interpret ancient ruins using human reference points. A young Zalarian girl even approached him to ask if humans really sang to the stars when they traveled between them. Carter had never felt pride like that before, not for himself, but for Earth, for humanity. But even as admiration grew, so did resentment. Some Zalarians scoffed at the change. "They're not one of us," they hissed. "We are not the same." In secret gatherings, there were still voices that called for Carter's exile, or worse. It didn't matter, because the idea was out there now. The spark had caught, and whether they liked it or not, the Zalarians had to confront a hard truth. Humanity had earned their place in the stars, not through conquest, but through the strength to uncover the past. The council chamber had quieted, the vote had passed. Cooperation between Earth and the Zalarian Empire would begin. But peace never blooms without shadows. In the outer systems, unrest stirred. A group calling themselves the True Lineage sent encrypted warnings. "We will not bow to apes who forgot their blood." Inside the Citadel, Carter began noticing strange figures watching him. Diplomatic messages between human and Zalarian embassies were intercepted, and in the hidden channels of the Zalarian net, conspiracy theories spread like a virus. Fabricated relics, human manipulation. Even Sorakai, once full of fire, looked tired. "We've changed history," she whispered one night. "But changing minds, that takes generations." Carter nodded. He knew this was only the beginning. Truth had torn open the silence of centuries. But what followed wouldn't be peace. Not yet. It would be a fight for the soul of two civilizations, and whether they could truly stand side by side, or fall divided by the very truth that had brought them together. Carter didn't fear the conflict. He welcomed it, because for the first time, Both humanity and the Zalarians had something worth fighting for each other. The Zalarian High Council chamber shimmered with soft blue light, humming with the energy of millennia-old technology. Dr. Carter stood at its center, flanked by towering figures cloaked in crystalline robes. A single offer hung in the air, heavier than any chains he had ever known. "Join us," the elder archivist intoned. "Guide our scholars, help rebuild history with truth." It was everything a historian could dream of. Access to the oldest archives in the galaxy, tools that could recreate entire civilizations from fragments, the chance to be remembered as the human who helped reconnect two lost species. But Carter didn't move. He stared beyond the vaulted glass walls into the infinite stars and imagined Earth, not the version sold in Zalarian records, the real one, flawed, struggling, brilliant. "I'm honored," he said quietly, "but I can't stay." Gasps echoed. Even Sorakai looked stunned. "Why?" she whispered. "This is history." Carter met her eyes. "So is what happens next on Earth." His voice was steady, but inside, a storm raged. He was giving up knowledge most could only dream of, but he had seen too much, learned truths that Earth had long forgotten or never known. He didn't want to shape history for another species. He wanted to return it to his own. And with that, he walked away from the most powerful offer in the galaxy, toward a future no one could predict. The ship hummed with life as it left Gorvex 9's orbit, stars stretching into streaks of white and gold. Carter sat alone in the observation bay, watching the void. His reflection stared back, older, wiser, but not at peace. The truth was a weight now, not a gift. Humanity had not started on Earth. They were not the center of the story. They were a piece, scattered and forgotten, one thread in a cosmic tapestry, and the Zalarians, once their distant cousins, had preserved more of their shared past than Earth ever had. But what would Earth do with that truth? Would it unite them, or divide them further? Carter reached into his satchel and pulled out the crystal key, the one that had unlocked the ancient vaults beneath the Zalarian soil. It pulsed faintly in his hand, alive with secrets. He whispered, "You'd better be ready, Earth, because everything's about to change." He wasn't just returning with knowledge, he was returning with proof, and that meant the world would have to choose, cling to old myths, or embrace a destiny far larger than they ever imagined. The Martian wind swept across the excavation site in dry, hissing waves. Red dust curled around the feet of engineers and archaeologists, their voices tense with excitement. "Careful with that edge. Get the lights. It's deeper than we thought." The metal casing was ancient, far older than any Earth structure, but its curves, its engravings, matched something Carter had shown them just days ago. Inside the research dome, the first scans lit up the screen, the same Zalarian glyphs, the same markings as the vaults Carter had opened on Gorvex 9. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Mars had been hiding a secret, the piece of the same forgotten puzzle. It meant the Zalarians had been here before, maybe even with humanity, long before history began. The lead scientist looked up. "We're going to need Carter back." The past wasn't buried, it was awakening, and the next chapter wasn't in the stars, it was under our feet.